What I want to talk about this afternoon is how we got to where we are, how we got to this point and where we're going from here. Now, Carl already mentioned a couple things about how things got started. Basically, the real start happened when I was in high school, when I had a Sunday school teacher my junior and senior year of high school, who was our Sunday school teacher, who happened to be vice principal of the high school. His view was that anything that had the word school in it had to act like school, which means it had to have homework. So my junior and senior year of Sunday school, every week we went, we had homework. We were to turn it in the week next when we came, and it would be graded and given back in our hands the following week. At least it had red marks on it usually. I didn't give a grade particularly, but he did make comments on it. And one week he gave us an assignment to put down on a piece of paper all the things we were good at, and next to it, write down how we could use that for the Lord. One of the things that I was doing at the time was building model cars, but in that list I couldn't think of what to put down about how you build model cars for the Lord. It wasn't until my mom pointed out to me that my real talent was building models, not building model cars. But I still didn't know exactly what I would do until I got to seminary here. And as Carl mentioned, actually it was right in this room. And we had my biblical literature class right here in this room, and it was just about this right same place where Dr. Stanley Ellison mentioned that all of the temples in Israel's history had had a model built of them, but Ezekiel's, and someday he'd like to see that. Well, I can tell you right now, and I've proved it several times, the notes that he gave us, I have blank for the rest of that day, because I was waiting to go talk to him about that. Now, several years later, the ministry didn't start right away then. I became a pastor of 2 churches in Northern California. It was about 10 years after I had left school that I was back in Portland and was just working a secular job at the time, didn't have a church. And I began to pray to the Lord, Lord, if you want me in the ministry. I tried to get into several churches, never worked. I had a family by then, so I just said, okay, God, listen. And I did pray this prayer. You know my name, my address, and my phone number. If you have something for me, you know how to get in touch with me. But I have a family, and I need to support them. So I'm getting a job, and I'm working, but you can get in touch with me anytime. It wasn't too long after that my wife came down to tell me that there had been a group here in Portland put together by the Hebrew professor at that time from this school, Dr. Ron Allen, who had started a friendship with some of the rabbis here in town and started an organization called the Evangelical Jewish Dialogue. And what they had decided to do was have an event that year in honor of Israel's independence. And as they were putting it together, one of the guys in the group said, that'd be really neat if we had a model of a temple we could set up at this thing. And my professor said, well, I think I know somebody who has a model of Ezekiel's temple if you want to use that. So they did. My model was put up in the foyer of Congregation Shari Torah here in Portland for that evening. And during that evening, one of the people who was attending that happened to be on the board for the National Prayer Breakfast in honor of Israel that was to be held in Washington, D.C. and would I be willing to take my model to Washington, D.C.? And of course I said no. Actually, no, I said yes. Especially since they were going to pay the whole way for me and I didn't have to pay anything, even the shipping of the model. But the speaker and the person of honor that day was Benjamin Netanyahu, who is now Prime Minister of Israel. I have to tell a story on my wife. Where they had the model set up was in a direction that was to go further into the hotel, and the doors were to the right, to the left, and my model was to the right. As Netanyahu and his entourage were leaving, they turned to go directly to the left and out the door, and my wife stepped right in front of him with all of his bodyguards and everything and said, "Sir, I think this is something you would want to see." Which right away he said, "Oh, I did want to see that." So I suppose that saved my wife that day from getting connected with the Mossad in a different way than we probably would have liked. The other interesting thing about that was that nobody had a camera put on us. So I do not have a picture of me meeting Benjamin Netanyahu. As a result of that event, when I came back to Portland, my ministry was begun, and we put together a series of, with the help of Dr. Rodmacher, we put together a series of messages that I could give in churches based upon the subject of Ezekiel's temple. Now, at one of those meetings, I met a gentleman by the name of Jimmy DeYoung, who's a news correspondent in Israel. And he suggested I come to Israel. And he gave me some ideas of how to do that. Now, my first time in Israel was very interesting too, because Jimmy suggested that I call, he gave me the phone numbers of a couple of rabbis and suggested I call them before I even left Portland so that they would know I was coming. I called this one rabbi, Rabbi Chaim Richman, who was the English representative from the Temple Institute. I called him on the phone, and I had this little spiel all worked out that I was going to give him. And I said, when he got on the phone, I said, "Hello, Rabbi, my name is John Schmidt. I live in Portland, Oregon." And I didn't even get further than that. And he said, "Yes, John, I'm familiar with your work." Now, I'd never met him before. And I was kind of taken aback because I can even send a pile of literature to a pastor across Portland and call him the next week and he doesn't remember who I am. But this guy a half a world away who I've never met already is familiar with my work. And that's how I got acquainted with, the beginning of how I got acquainted with the rabbis a number of years ago. Now I want to fast forward because we could take a long time talking about what's happened in the last 30 years. But a few years ago now, and I want to just say this. The story I'm going to unfold to you right now just shows you how God does things when he wants to get something done. Lori and I were in Israel a few years ago, and one of the things we were going to do was discuss and meet up with some of the rabbis that I had met with in the past. But on one of those days, we were going to be moving to a new hotel. Now, I've always discovered that the best thing to do when you're moving to a hotel is plan nothing else that day, because getting out of the one hotel and getting everything settled with them and getting moved into the other one, if you happen to make an appointment with somebody and you're not all the way through with what you're doing, then you've got a big problem. So I just always decided when I'm in Israel, if I have to change hotels, I just won't plan anything. If it goes good, then, well, I got a free day. If I don't, well, then I'm glad I have the time. Well, we got to our new hotel about noon, and they said check-in wasn't till 4, but we have this room we can put all your luggage so you don't have to worry about it.